The Secrets of Star Trek is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, episode number 68.
Captain to bridge.
Spock here.
Make it so. Surrender is not an option.
Attention crew of the Enterprise, this is James Kirk.
We are all explorers, driven to know what's over the horizon, what's beyond our own shores.
We would have helped you get home if you had asked. That's who Starfleet is.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. Today we're discussing the Deep Space Nine episode, A Man Alone. And joining me today is Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
So we are missing Father Corey this week. He has some duties from being pastor that he has to take care of as captain of his Starship Parish. He's got to lead there and not join us this week. So, but he'll be back next time, which will be good. Before we get into this week's episode, I do want to encourage everyone, if you are listening to this, if someone shared a file with you, or if you're listening on our website, be sure to subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, anywhere you can get podcasts, and on your favorite podcast app. You can also listen on YouTube if you go to the SQPN YouTube channel, where if you do subscribe, be sure to hit the bell to get notifications. So, A Man Alone, it's the next Deep Space Nine episode in the first season. I have to say, Jimmy, that my recollection of the first season of Deep Space Nine was that there wasn't very many good episodes.
Yeah.
I don't know how you feel about this one. I kind of like this one. It wasn't great, but I kind of like it. And it's kind of funny. I think my memory of that first season is completely impacted by Run Along Home. Move Along Home.
Okay.
That has completely undermined my memory of the season. Yeah.
Even worse than that is the one where O'Brien has to become the storyteller in this reverse psychology on a village thing. And that one's the worst to me. That stands out in my memory.
Was that also first season?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Oh, okay.
This one is not aggressively bad in that way.
Yes.
And of course, people will know, longtime listeners, that Deep Space Nine is actually yours, mine, and Father Corey's favorite of all the Star Trek series.
That's right.
But like a lot of series, it has a shaky early season. And this episode, I think, doesn't really, it's not aggressively bad, but I have in my notes that it doesn't really gel, because what's happening is they're doing so much world building. This is a very early episode. They're trying to introduce us to lots of things. So instead of a normal thing where a normal episode where you'd have an A plot and a B plot and maybe a few little character moments sprinkled throughout, this has 5 different subplots that are happening in it. And we spend so much time jumping from one to another that there's no time to emotionally invest in any one of these things. And the episode comes off kind of flat to me.
Well, I mean, there's some things that seem so disconnected. Like, let's just talk about the tease of this episode. This pre-credit teaser where we have Dax in a holosuite playing a brain teaser game.
A blobby meditation game, yeah.
Right.
She's got this big blob that's in front of her, and she's mentally manipulating it.
And then Bashir barrels into this and starts hitting on her in that embarrassing pre-Me Too way that he has.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about what's the purpose of this scene? It has no connection to the rest of the episode.
Yeah, this is world building. In terms of the characters anyway, what this is doing, because Julian and Dax aren't the only characters in this. Sisko shows up and Dax goes off with Sisko, leaving Julian alone to play the blobby meditation game. And what this is doing is introducing us to the character dynamic between these three figures and how they interact at this point in their character arcs.
Right.
Where it shows us that Dax is this cool woman who is not interested in a relationship with anybody right now. It shows us that Julian has the hots for Dax, but he's also intimidated by Captain Sisko, who is an old friend of Dax, and he thinks Dax is going to be romantically interested in Sisko. And they then play with that later in the episode. Is Dax interested in Sisko or not? It turns out not. We have Dax and Sisko later reconnecting with each other now that Curzon is no longer the host and Jadzia is.
Right.
And so this is all explaining to us how Trill relationships work and also how these particular people fit together. And so that's all that Blobby meditation scene was to get us into this character dynamic.
Right. There'll be a couple scenes throughout the episode where some of that stuff plays out, I guess. Yeah. And this is, again, the third episode of this series, and we've got this the only time we've seen Trill before, they were different in the Next Generation. So they're really trying to establish what is it like to have these connections with the Trill, I guess. And it establishes that separation. Sisko and Dax are friends, and he sees her as, the continuation of Curzon, whereas Bashir sees her as Jadzia, this cute girl that he wants to be romantically involved with. Although even here, I think she's older than him, like considerably. It's very it's very uncomfortable watching it. Even I remember even back then when it was first airing, how aggressively embarrassing Bashir
Julian is.
Yeah. In this first season. So it's very interesting how he changes over the course of the series. It becomes very. I really enjoy Bashir later on, but early on, yeah. So post credits, we have this scene in Ops. I think it's in Quarks, and it plays out. It's like a stage play. You have 3 different stories that play out in different parts of the same set. I thought that was very nice. I feel like the director, Paul Lynch. I don't know what else he's directed for DS9, but I felt like he was playing with this set that they have, this really great set that they have for Deep Space Nine, which is unlike most of the other series that we've or unlike TNG, frankly, which is the other series we had. We had this great set piece of Quark's bar, and so we have a few things that happen. We have Quark and Odo, and I did notice that, by the way, Quark's in early days was very smoky.
Yeah, despite the fact no one is smoking.
Right.
Yeah.
Then we also have Keiko and Miles arguing. They're in another part of the bar where she's unhappy to be there, and this is another thread that's going to run through this episode. She's unhappy to be on Deep Space Nine, and Quark says she doesn't like it here, and Odo says, "Who does?" Which is an interesting character moment.
Yeah,
for
don't want to say that to the viewing audience.
Yes, I know. It's interesting, even from a writer point of view.
As you're trying to get them invested in your series.
Right. Odo and Quark talk about how relationships compromise you. That was actually kind of a funny moment where Odo's talking about, you want to watch the sports ball tournament, and she wants to, go out to dinner. So you compromise and go out to dinner. Like, Odo has a very negative view of marriage and relationships, I have to say.
At this point,
that's right.
Yeah. Notice this is also more series building here. We've got it being established that Odo and Quark are not on the same team, but they get along. And then we have the marital difficulties of the O'Briens, and we also have Dax and Sisko doing their bonding thing. And then we have this Bajoran guy
who shows
up, and we don't know who he is, but Odo totally freaks out about it.
Yeah.
And it turns out his name is Ibudan, and he's a black marketeer and murderer, we are told. Although we never see any actual, well, I guess we eventually get evidence for murder, but we've got some informed attributes here.
Right.
To get us into this story.
Yeah, Odo confronts him and tells him, get off my station. You have 24 hours and
26.
Yeah, I'm sorry, 26. Yes, the Bajoran day, and he says, "You can't tell me to do that. I know my rights." And Odo says, "I decide who has rights here," and then gets in a fight with him until Sisko shows up to break it up.
And this is embarrassing for Odo as a peace officer. This is more unprofessional, actually,
right.
of Odo than Julian was being unprofessional. I mean, he was being a bit of a jerk in his private life, but he wasn't doing something that was contrary to his medical profession.
Yeah.
Odo should understand the rules that govern this space station.
Right. And you can understand, like, Odo, under the Cardassians, that may have been true. Like, he decided who had rights under the law, because Cardassian law is a wholly different creature than Bajoran or Federation or Earth laws. And it's like he's getting used to, or he has to, learn to adapt to the new way of doing things, where he doesn't decide who has rights. I mean, Odo is justice without, like, all justice, no mercy, in that sense.
Pretty close to that.
Yeah.
Not really, because he actually does have mercy, and especially on the Quark. But
right.
But yeah, but Cisco has to call him on the carpet about it back in his office and say, you cannot take the law into your own hands, and if you can't operate within the rules, I'll have to find someone who can. So he threatened to fire him.
Right. Odo has this moment. He says, the law, Commander, laws change depending on who's making them. Cardassians one day, Federation the next, but justice is justice. And as long as I'm in charge of security, and that's when Cisco jumps in and says, you don't have to be in charge of security if you can't follow my laws, the Federation laws. So he kind of calls him on that.
We also get a little more information about the O'Briens and what's going on with them. As you said, Keiko doesn't like it on the station because there's nothing for her to do.
She's a botanist.
As a botanist.
Yeah.
And I'm going, well, I don't know. You got a whole big planet right under you could study.
Right.
On Bajor, but Miles tells her he's willing to put in for a transfer.
Yep.
Which would harm his career, but if he took another assignment at this point for some reason, but he's willing to do that
too
for
quickly. They only just got there, so if he were to request a reassignment, that would be seen as not. So I get that.
Also, more series building. Here's another plot thread for us to have this episode we're going to have to follow. Jake meets Nog for the first time.
Right. And Nog doesn't like him at first. He's not receptive to being friends. And Jake's like, look, there aren't other kids our age here. If you want a friend, I'm it. And of course, that'll be yet another great relationship through the series. But it doesn't have a great start. It's kids getting in trouble and Nog being sort of, Ferengi are bad sort of thing, that sort of, it's not great. So we finally get to the whole point of the episode, which is
the A plot, which is much diminished with all these other plots going on around it.
Right. Exactly. We see Ibudan in a holosuite getting a massage, and someone comes in and murders him. He's stabbed, while he's on the massage table. So before we get to the investigation,
before we get back to that, we have more diversion onto other subplots. So
right, I was going to say that
we have Jake and Nog have these Garanian bolites that they play a prank with. They release them onto people, and it causes them to itch and have flashes of color on their face.
Yes, they turn bright blue and orange and that sort of thing.
Yeah. We also then have more discussion of trills and romance, and Jadzia reveals that trills don't like romance, and I'm going, how do you reproduce if,
right.
Normally in most species, that's the equivalent of romance is to get them to reproduce.
Well, like the first, again, in TNG, when we saw Trill the first time, with Dr. Crusher, there
was a romance.
There was a romance. And then Jadzia, and then Curzon, even like the stories about Curzon. Curzon was, famous for romancing, the ladies. So, yeah, it just, maybe it was her, Jadzia was trying to get rid of Bashir, maybe?
Well, they don't tell us that.
Yeah, they don't.
Also, and then we jump to another subplot with, now we have Keiko is in the captain's quarters with Jake and discussing how the station needs a school.
Right.
So even though she's never taught before, she's going to become a school marm and give the kids lots of busy work because they actually can study more efficiently the way things are right now, but they need structured activity so they won't get into trouble. So they need busy work.
Right. Right. And then we get back to the A plot, which is and then we get back to the A plot, which is Odo and Kira and Cisco and Bashir are in the holosuite with Ibadan's body on the floor, and Odo's relaying the circumstances of the murders, kind of running down the, what happened, who checked in. It's a classic locked door murder mystery, essentially.
Yeah.
There's no evidence of anyone coming in, but someone did go out. So, no one beamed in. We have to, establish that it's Star Trek. And the murderer knew Bajoran anatomy, knew just where to strike with one blow. So that establishes, okay, so how did someone get in there in the beginning and to kill him, and then got out? So
the
big
Odo
mystery
points out the obvious, or what seems obvious, that there's no way for anyone to do this unless they're a shapeshifter.
Right. He immediately, points a finger at himself.
Yeah. Although I'm thinking, actually, there should be if holodecks are generating matter around you to create the illusion of this environment, they should be tracking every real object in there.
Yes.
And have a clear scan of what it looks like in order to materialize matter around it. So
Right.
you should be able, there ought to functionally be the equivalent of a security cam running in every holodeck as soon as you turn it on.
Right. If you're going to commit a murder in a holodeck, there should be like a part where the murderer erases the holodeck log or something like that. You gotta cover that base. Meanwhile, a Bajoran shopkeeper who was with Ibudan in Quarks, he comes forward to Cisco and Kira and tells them that Ibudan told him he was afraid that Odo would kill him. Because we kind of went quickly past it. Ibudan wasn't just a black marketeer. He gouged the Bajoran people for medical supplies and let a child die when her parents couldn't pay him for the medical supplies. So that's Odo's supposed motivation here for hating Ibudan.
With a typical Hollywood understanding of price gouging.
Right. Odo then goes to Ibadan's quarters on the ship that brought him to DS9. Ibadan had been in a Cardassian prison and was recently released. And it turns out they were double accommodations. Dun dun dun. Because he didn't just want more room. Like, okay, whatever.
In fairness, they do point out maybe he just wanted more room.
Right. And then Odo finds an entry in Ibadan's calendar that's showing that he had an appointment with Odo, which Odo, of course, does not recall. And
Odo was in his bucket at the time, so he knows he didn't kill this guy.
Right.
But he has no witnesses that he was in his bucket. Apparently, he doesn't have security cams in his own quarters.
Yes, exactly. Well, if I were head of security, I don't think I would either.
Really? I think I'm a target. I want them.
I'd have security around the perimeter, but not in it.
Still, it should show you coming in and not leaving.
Yeah, that's true. Although, as a shapeshifter, he can get in and out of places.
Yeah.
As we've established with the holosuite. Then we have that scene where Cisco and Keiko are talking about the school, and one of the things Cisco brings up is he warns her, A, I can't make anyone send their kids to your school, and B, you're going to have to deal with different cultures, and that's going to be important at the end of this season, of course.
Yeah,
when we have the introduction of Kai Wynn, or not Vedek Wynn at the time.
I love how naive both the writers and Keiko are in this scene, because Keiko is like, I can't imagine any parent not welcoming the idea of a school opening here. Yeah. I'm going, how about all the homeschoolers that are on the station right now?
Right.
And then she's like, we're going to need supplies for this school. And Cisco's like, well, what do you need? Oh, we'll need space. Okay, you'll have it. We'll need computers. You'll have it. That's like asking for paper.
Yes, this is the 24th century.
As soon as you've got space, computers come with it.
That's right. Right. In Star Trek, everything comes with computers. So, and in fact, they do show there is some resistance to Keiko's idea from some of the parents.
Considerable. She gets no commitments up front.
Right.
Other than Jake.
And again, she's not a teacher; she's a botanist. So there is a little bit of naivete. I do like, again, this Cisco and Jake interaction, father-son interaction here. I kind of enjoy that. I've always that's one of my favorite things about the series is that interaction between the father and the son, and how Cisco forbids Jake from hanging around with Nog anymore, which it's amusing.
Yeah, like that's going to stick.
Yeah. Then we find out that Bashir reveals that he found no other DNA in the Hollow Suite where Ubadan was killed other than Ubadan and those who were there after the murder. And then that's when Odo implicates himself as the only person who could have got in. Then he admits he has no alibi. This is where he admits he doesn't have an alibi. And then we get Keiko talking to Rom about Nog at the school. And this is a very interesting moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I like this.
Well, and especially because Rom here is played by the same actor who will play Rom throughout the series. But this Rom is very different from the Rom we will get in the second season.
He's not the lovable, cute, bumbling guy who ends up haplessly becoming Grand Nagus at this point. He's he's much colder, more distant, and xenophobic. Yes, much more Ferengi, much more articulate. And it's also part of, you can see why he would fail in business here, because he is so xenophobic in a hospitality industry. Right. I mean, Quark is much more outgoing and happy and let's please the customer. Right. But I do like, what I like about this scene is that Keiko, they're taking seriously the fact that cultures are different. And Keiko's going to have to work with people from multiple cultures if she's going to do this school thing. So she has done some homework on Ferengis and how they educate. And she is, of course, she's telling Rom what he already knows. But she says, I understand that you Ferengi employ a work-study approach with apprenticeships. And that makes tons of sense for Ferengi. Right. And then she uses that to argue why Rom should send Nog to her school in Ferengi terms, things that will appeal to Ferengi, not this abstract knowledge to learn about other cultures for its own sake thing. It's think of the business advantages that will come to your son if he's learned about other cultures, and he'll have a leg up on all the other Ferengi. And so, like, Rom gets that as a motive. So I like this part. And she says, knowledge is power, Mr. Rom. So, yeah, that was good. And then he says, well, it won't work. And why not? Because you're female. And I know. We immediately get to Ferengi sexism.
Yeah. But so he promised, I'll think about it. Yeah, go away. I'm busy. And then we have in the same scene in the bar, we have this Bajoran shopkeeper named Zara, who is starting to incite people against Odo. What do we know about him anyway? He's not one of us. He used to work for the Cardassians, which actually is an interesting point. Like, the fact is Odo worked for the Cardassians under the occupation. Now, Kira has addressed this, and in fact, I think she addresses it in this episode, that, sure, he was head of security, but he was fair. Like, he wasn't in fact, Quark says it here. He may have been ill-tempered and overbearing, but he was no Cardassian collaborator, and he's no killer. He was fair.
Notice Quark is sticking up for Odo here, thus revealing how much he actually likes Odo. Yes. Yeah, and it's not just because he feels like he can, beat Odo in his criminal enterprises, which he doesn't anyway, so, or at least some of them. And then we get this, there's a shifty-looking Bajoran in a hood and a cloak sitting nearby. Who might that be? Yeah. Yes, it's very, very cleverly disguised. He'll come up later. So the Bajorans go to complain to Sisko in Ops. Kira doesn't like it, but Sisko knows that you can't have the prime suspect running the investigation, and Odo understands that as well. I love the. I mean, a lot of this comes across as paint by numbers writing to me, right? But I love how Dax points out that if Odo's in charge of the investigation of himself, it, quote, could still seem like a conflict of interests, close quote. I'm like, no, it flat out is a conflict of interest to be in charge of your own criminal investigation. Right. So then we have Bashir going on board the freighter where Ibadan came from, where he had his quarters were, and he's vacuuming up samples of debris in the room or of some sort. And he discovers that Ibadan was doing some kind of medical experiment on his ship, he says, Yeah, he says he has a biosample container. And at that moment, I said Ibadan cloned himself and killed the clone.
Right. Which is, the classic, kill your twin.
Yeah. Explaining the double occupancy of why he needed the extra space in the freighter.
Right. He says, Bashir at one point says, the complex proteins are breaking down into DNA fragments. I'm like, that's not how that works.
I know.
That's not how proteins and DNA work.
It must be really complex proteins if it's built out of DNA fragments it can break down into.
Yeah, it's the DNA is breaking into DNA fragments. That's what DNA fragments are. Oh my gosh, that was kind of crazy. Yeah, I think they got their science, Andre Bormanis, their science consultant, working on this stuff later in the series. Sisko confirms with Odo that he's temporarily removed from duty. Odo takes exception to Sisko telling him that he doesn't believe he killed Ubadan. Look, I have to remove you. I don't believe that you killed Ubadan, but I have to remove you from the investigation. And Odo's like, why? Why don't you believe I killed him? You should think I killed him. Like, Odo was very, very upset. Like, I had every motive. I had opportunity. I had, so it's very interesting.
It's also, so I had a few notes about this point in the episode. One is that Sisko puts Dax and Kira in charge of the investigation at this point. And I'm going, no, it should go to whoever is next in charge of security, unless that person is also compromised.
Right.
Who's
the Starfleet guy that will eventually be turned into the Maquis? Who's Odo's?
Yeah, he's not in the show yet.
Okay, he's not there yet. All right.
Yeah, but so Sisko relieves Odo of duty, and Odo then gets overly dramatic. And Sisko's telling him, I'm doing this, not only for the sake of the investigation, but it's in your best interest too. And I'm going, yeah, it is in Odo's best interest not to head his own investigation, because he will forever have the cloud of you covered up for yourself if you do head the investigation. And Sisko is like, I don't believe you did it, but for the sake of form, we need to do it this way. And Odo does it's not, I didn't take it as Odo's telling him, you should definitely believe I did it for a fact.
Right. No.
But you have every reason to suspect me. You don't know me. Don't pretend to me that there's not some doubt in your mind.
Right.
And that's a very reasonable point.
That's true. Yes. That's how it comes across. He's don't patronize me for either, to pretend that you don't have some reason to suspect me. So Odo heads back to his office on the promenade where the Bajorans, are talking about him. That's him. They found his DNA. And it's like, well, of course that's him. It's not like a very large station where people don't recognize the head of security, who's a shapeshifter, the only one of his kind. That's him. But he gets back to his office and
it's been vandalized.
Again, no security cameras.
I know. It's like, this is the head security office, and you don't have security cameras recording who vandalized it. That is ridiculous. Also, I don't particularly like the graffiti that's been painted on the walls. They haven't yet settled on what racially derogatory terms to use for Odo yet, and so it just says shifter on the wall.
Yes, and they'll be chanting at him later, and it just it's kind of weird. It's not menacing. It's just weird. Quark shows up, and they verbally spar a little bit, and
it's so clear in this scene they are best frenemies.
Yes. And in fact, Quark, Odo says to Quark, "You think you could use a shapeshifter in your organization?" And Quark's like, "Oh, you had me going." And I'm thinking, was Odo at all serious when he asked? It felt like he was half serious, like, I'm going to have to leave this job. Now, and maybe I should go work for Quark. I felt like there was the implication was that he was really thinking about it. And then when Quark said, "Oh, you had me going there," that he's like, "Oh, yeah, I was not serious."
Yeah, I thought the same thing. It feels like he's not committing to it, but he's exploring the idea of working for Quark.
But it does turn out that even Quark is trying to find out who really killed Ubadan. Again, the frenemy thing. And gives him some key information about, Ibadan's time in prison and perhaps who he was in prison with. That becomes an important piece of evidence later, an important clue. Then we have Sisko accidentally invites Bashir to lunch. Sisko's trying to take Dax to lunch, and she's too busy with the investigation. And Bashir's like, "Oh, I'll come," and invites himself, and they talk about Dax, and they don't know how many hosts Dax has had, and
which is implausible.
Right.
I mean, Cisco should know how many hosts Dax has had.
Right. Is this the 12th Doctor or the 11th Doctor? So Cisco, he guesses that Jadzia is the 6th host, which I think is what they established as. No. We later established that there was another one that was suppressed because it was insane person. Spoilers. But Cisco does make it clear that he has no romantic interest in Dax, and in fact tells to Bashir, go for it. If she's interested, go for it. So apparently that's Bashir's thing. Odo comes to the bar, and everybody leaves, including Morn, who at this point is not the silent good guy that we know him to be later on. But is just another one of the aliens.
Silent.
Yeah. Morn never. I like how they eventually establish Morn as he's this guy who never shuts up, was always talking, and yet he never says a word the entire series, all 7 seasons on screen. I just love that about the character. So we get Keiko setting up her new school. School
with
room.
Images from the Starfleet medical manual that was published in the 1970s that I had a copy of as a kid.
Oh, excellent. And while they're in there, the Bajorans start attacking Odo on the promenade.
And this is a very poorly thought out lynch mob,
Yes.
as becomes evident to the members of the lynch mob when they start to debate exactly what they're going to do to the shapeshifter once they've got him.
We should hang the shapeshifter. No, that won't work. He'll turn into a rope. What do you do to a shapeshifter to lynch him?
Also, if Odo has been relieved of duty, he should not be sitting in his security office where this mob finds him. He should be in his quarters or somewhere else, anywhere but where the investigation should be based.
Right, and he's not the only security officer on the station. There should be other security officers who could sit in there. And I was also thinking this is going to get real awkward on board the station when Odo is cleared. You know what I mean? Like, oh, sorry about the whole lynching thing later.
Yeah.
I just got cut up.
Then we have the obligatory action sequence, followed by the captain giving us the obligatory lecture about not condemning those who are different from us.
Yes. We want justice. And, Cisco, is it justice you're after or just some way to express your anger? What are you all angry about again? Oh, that Odo supposedly killed this child murderer?
Yeah.
Black marketeer? I mean, why are we mad again? Yeah, I mean, if the security chief has murdered somebody, then that's bad. But like a mob, it just doesn't. He didn't. Yeah, not an upstanding member of the community that was killed. So.
Meanwhile, the complex proteins that broke down into DNA fragments have been growing into a huge thing in a tank in Medbay, and yet, even though it's macroscopic in a big way, Julian can't tell what kind of DNA it has yet.
Right. It's grown into this giant lump of flesh, but he doesn't know what it is yet. Like, hello?
You only need a single cell to find out what kind of DNA it has.
Right. So he, at this point in the, with the mob there, he shows up to reveal that the dead body wasn't Ibudan, it was a clone. And the new one they're going to allow it to be born. And I'm thinking, will he be born with memory or personality? I mean, or will be a blank slate? I mean,
This is an adult-sized clone.
Yeah. This is it. So, there's the science fiction trope of clones who are, who also apparently have the same memories and personality of the person that they've been cloned from. That's a trope, somewhat impossible sort of idea, but okay. But they're going to allow this person to be
hard.
Born. What's that?
At least hard. You need to copy the memories somehow and then implant them.
Right. Which, it's being Star Trek is probably, just requires some computer fiddling and a tricorder. So, and meanwhile, that cloaked Bajoran, the shifty looking one, he's looking out from the edge of the mob. So don't want to forget him. He's there. And Odo shows up in that guy's quarters, of the old Bajoran guy, on board that ship, who has no record of arriving on the station. And it's Ibudan, of course, in disguise. And Odo reveals that in prison, Ibudan had befriended a scientist who knew about cloning technology. And that's the big thing. as Odo says, killing your own clone is still murder.
Which is one of the best lines in the series and one that I can fully get behind. Yes. Killing your clone is still murder.
Right, exactly. Unlike some movies that we shall not name now. So no one from the mob apologizes to Odo. Yeah, that's very clear. Cisco wraps up the whole mystery in a log entry. We just kind of like, oh, and that's all done. And we have a log entry from the captain, and that's the end of that. And then we have the first day of school. Everyone's late, and we see Rom bring in Nog to school, and that's where we end.
Oh, and this is more paint by numbers writing, because to juice the drama in this scene, Keiko is revealed she's had no prior commitments other than Captain Cisco saying, or Commander at this point, Cisco saying he's going to send Jake to this school.
Right.
Nobody else has agreed to send their kid to this school, and everyone coincidentally shows up late.
Right.
And they come in one at a time, and it just builds the drama with this kind of It's a Wonderful Life finale feeling, except I've seen this before. I've had the T-shirt. This is paint by numbers writing.
Right. It's designed to elicit an emotional response and from the audience, and very, very transparently. It's not a great way of doing that. But this school, like I said, will become important plot-wise at the end of the first season, and then we'll have. I don't want to talk too much about that. We'll talk about that when that shows up. So, Jimmy, any other notes on this episode?
Nope.
Okay, yeah. I mean, like you said, it's a pretty standard. It serves two purposes. It tells us more about the people that we're gonna get to know in this series, and then we have this murder mystery, which like you, I figured out as soon as he found the medical experiment, the biosample container, and in true Star Trek fashion, we knew the resolution.
Yeah.
So we do have some feedback I want to go through on some previous episodes, and we love getting your feedback. And so our first feedback comes about episode 64, where we talked about Discovery's Context is for Kings. This came from Bennett Gillespie on Facebook. Bennett says, you mentioned Jason Isaacs' accent. He has very much a Southern American accent in this, although he is not American. He said, Bennett says that Jason Isaac deliberately allowed a different accent to slip through or become pronounced at times of stress or jubilation, and he says, spoiler, sweetie, to complement his hidden depths. Too subtle for my English ears, but I've heard a linguist ask him about it at a talk, and was delighted that someone had noticed the extra efforts he put in. If you ever get a chance to hear him, he's a great raconteur, which I would love to hear him, because I liked him in this series. I don't want to spoil it for anyone, including our editor Victor, who is based on our talking about these first few episodes, has decided to watch the first season of Discovery with his wife. So Victor, I don't want to spoil anything for you going forward, but yes, it is. I really like Jason Isaac in this.
Yeah, and in terms of what his accent is, it being from the South, my ear is more attuned to. For me, there is not one Southern accent. There are multiple different kinds of Southern accents, and his strikes my ear as West Texas.
Yes,
it's not strong, but it sounds more like West Texas than anything else.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, I've been exposed to my share of Texans, and I agree with that. And then on our episode 61 on the Babylon 5 versus DS9 discussion that you had with Father Corey, Kelly Brown on Facebook writes, I've been a fan of DS9 from near the beginning of it being aired, but I've never watched Babylon 5. After listening to this podcast, I wanted to finally check it out. Thanks to Amazon Prime, I'm close to finishing out the first season.
Oh.
Even though the CGI is very primitive, but cutting edge for the time, I'm getting hooked on the show because of the characters, and I love watching the storyline unfold. I now wish I watched the show when it first aired. I am a fan. Even though I'm over 20 years too late to the party, I will say I do enjoy DS9 more. I like the characters more, and I like the Trek universe better.
Uh-huh. I'm glad you're enjoying that, and by the end of the first season, you only have a glimmer of where this is going. The plot really blows up after that and goes in much bigger directions.
Yeah. Again, you're not too late. I've watched a handful of Babylon 5 episodes. I really need to get back into it and start watching it myself. So if you're not too late, I'm not too late. So, and then on episode 65, where we discussed the original series' Enemy Within, Tammy on YouTube says, I love the philosophical elements in this episode and enjoyed your exploration of that. Despite the plot holes, this remains one of my favorite TOS episodes. I think the Voyager episode Faces shares some elements when the seriously, she writes, creepy Vidian scientist kidnaps Torres and divides her Klingon half from her human side. In some ways, I think that eliminated some of the plot issues that the Enemy Within had, though I still favor the episode over the Voyager one. Oh, and I have to mention the scene in Galaxy Quest when they decide to beam up the pig lizard creature before testing the transporter on the captain, only to have it arrive inside out, and it exploded. So I love this original series reference there. Thanks again, guys. Great show. Well, thank you, Tammy.
Yeah.
There is much to recommend the Enemy Within episode. We talked about, despite whatever plot holes there are.
And like a lot of the better Star Trek episodes, it's kind of a Twilight Zone episode in the 23rd century.
Yes. So, as we finish out, we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the secrets of Star Trek, including Paul B., William N., Lisa P., George O., and Father Jason. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And that's it from us. What did you think of A Man Alone, this Deep Space Nine episode? Let us know by visiting sqpn.com/trek or the StarQuest Facebook page. And you can also send us an email to trek@sqpn.com. And we'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the Voyager episode, The Cloud. Until then, Jimmy Aiken, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Trek.
Thanks, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, I don't want years on my life if I can only eat steamed asna. Sautéed, rolloped, fricasseed, fine, but not steamed.